A thread by Carlos Osuita. I'll let all the gun folks vent on the last thread as I explain why the Federal Reserve is necessary. Not good, great, wonderful, but necessary for our freedom. My interest was piqued by this meme I saw for the first time last night. The meme, in case you're just listening, Benjamin Guggenheim, Isa Strauss, Jacob Astor, all opposed the new Federal Reserve Bank. Today, these men would be worth $11 billion. All three of these men were aboard the Titanic when it sank. All three died that night. These three patriots stopped the Rothschild banking mafia from establishing the Federal Reserve parasite into our nation, so the family invited them aboard the Titanic and then sank the ship. Carlos responds, Benjamin Guggenheim was a mining and smelting magnate. Since he dealt mostly with silver, he was known as the Silver Prince. Conspiracy theorists don't know that he was Jewish. Isidor Straus was a Confederate Army veteran, the owner of Macy's, a politician, and a board member of the Mutual Alliance Trust Company. He was also Jewish. John Jacob Astor IV was a businessman, real estate developer, investor, inventor, and writer. He inherited wealth and made even more money in real estate. Astor and Guggenheim led riotous personal lives, leading them to be shunned by polite society. There's no evidence whatsoever that Guggenheim, Strauss, and Astor opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve. But the deaths of these three men on the Titanic are used in two more conspiracy theories. One, they opposed an income tax, no evidence, and banker J.P. Morgan sank the Titanic to kill his rivals, Guggenheim, Strauss, and Astor. Well, they weren't his rivals because none were bankers. So, an alternate conspiracy theory is that Morgan killed them because they opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve. Again, there's no evidence that Guggenheim, Strauss, and Astor opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve was created to stop J.P. Morgan. You have to go back to the panic of 1907. In 1907, Otto Heinze tried to corner the market on copper. Otto's brother F. Augustus Heinze and banker Charles W. Morse had manipulated stock prices and successfully cornered multiple markets. So they went for copper. Otto and Augustus bought as many shares as they could. The plan was to make short sellers, people who bet that stock values will fall, sell at a giant loss, and the Heinzes and Morse would sell those shares at fire sale prices, thus owning the whole copper market. Charles T. Barney, president of the Knickerbocker Trust Company, provided tons of financing to buy the shares needed to squeeze the market, but it wasn't enough. The Heinzes went ahead anyway. When stock prices on copper reached $52 per share on October 15, 1907, Otto Heinze called in all the short sellers' borrowed shares. But they were able to find shares from other holders. The Heinzes misread the market, and the price of copper collapsed. The short sellers walked away with millions, and the Heinzes lost everything they owned. United Copper Company declared bankruptcy, and the State Savings Bank of Butte, Indiana, owned by F. Augustus Heinze, declared insolvency. F. Augustus was president of the Mercantile National Bank in New York City. Depositors made a run on the bank, pulling out all their money. Then there was a run on the Charles W. Morse Bank. Since he owned several banks, there were runs on those too. Regional stock exchanges began to close, and banks got spooked and stopped lending money. That caused a nationwide run on banks. Interest rates on loans went up to 70%. Since brokers couldn't get money, the New York Stock Exchange fell 50% from its peak on the previous year. We were headed for a totally unprecedented financial collapse, worse than the Great Depression, in that it happened in 3 weeks, and the government had absolutely no way to do anything about it. No Federal Reserve means no ability to change interest rates and inject liquidity or make loans. All the banks were privately owned, and they were going under one by one. Enter JP Morgan. He saved us at a massive cost to us. He used his own personal wealth and that of his bank to shore up the banking system. He also twisted his banker cronies' arms and had them do the same. Right after Morgan solved the problem, it threatened to happen again. The stock price of the Tennessee Coal, Iron, and Railroad Company, TC&I, collapsed. Brokerage firms and banks that used the stock as collateral were about to go under. With no choice, the government allowed J.P. Morgan to illegally take over TC&I to prevent another panic. Guess who ran the government from that point on? Yup, J.P. Morgan. Now, you tell me, what are the odds that old JP engineered a little stock collapse here and a bank run there? The Federal Reserve, warts and all, was created specifically to prevent private citizens from owning the financial system and therefore the government. Some of you have already figured out where I'm going with this. JP Morgan had zero interest in social engineering. He just wanted beautiful, beautiful money. Before I hit you with the kill shot, guess how rich the richest Rothschild is. Baron Benjamin de Rothschild is the richest Rothschild. He has $1.7 billion. Without the Federal Reserve, who would be called upon to save the country? Jeff Bezos, Amazon, $114 billion. Bill Gates, Microsoft, $106 billion. Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, $80.8 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, $69.6 billion. Larry Page, Google, $55.5 billion. Sergey Brin, Google, $53.5 billion. Michael Bloomberg, Bloomberg LP, $53.4 billion. All are rabidly leftist social engineers. But wait, it gets better. The Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, of October 3rd, 2008, used $700 billion to purchase toxic assets from banks. Not even the masters of the universe could swing that, so they'd pick and choose, eliminating all conservative banks and businesses. And that is why the Federal Reserve keeps us free. It was created to protect us from the predatory elite in an era during which all they cared about was money. Now, all they care about is leftism. More specifically, absolutist Marxism. I'm not saying you have to love the Federal Reserve, but you must accept that without it, we'd all be slaves. J.P. Morgan proved it in 1907, and he was a saint in comparison to today's predatory elite. Addendum, mini thread. Check the first tweet. From Carlos, I give you facts, and you give pie in the sky rhetoric. If we go back on the gold standard, an economic black swan like the pandemic means we all become subsistence farmers and hunter-gatherers forever. That's reality. The U.S. gold reserves are $11 billion. The U.S. gross domestic product is $21 trillion. There isn't $21 trillion in gold on planet Earth. All of the gold mined in human history is about $7.5 trillion. The remaining unmined gold left in the world is an estimated $2.5 trillion. So if we go back on the gold standard, we'll have no choice but to reduce the value of our economy by at least 75%. That means we all get to live like third worlders. If we have a black swan like the pandemic, we get to go back to the dark ages. It's quite a price to pay for your principles, isn't it?